Well, millions of people in the UK and around the globe are preparing to witness the coronation of King Charles III. Saturday's largely symbolic ceremony will be full of pageantry, with customs dating back more than 1,000 years. So let's bring in Nigel Fletcher to talk a little bit more about this. He is a professor of politics and British history at King's College. Thanks for joining us, Nigel. So he goes from being a prince to a king. Well, he's already the king, but this is the formal ceremony. But I think a lot of people might wonder, he's kind of a figurehead. He's not a politician. Does taking over as king expand his influence in any way?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And as you say, this is the formal coronation, the crowning of the king. But he became the king immediately that Queen Elizabeth II died. And so, in a way, this is, as you said in the introduction, it is a symbolic ceremony. But it also has a deeper meaning. This is, we mustn't forget, a religious ceremony. It's a ceremony in which he is anointed as sovereign, which is one of the few countries in the world that still does that. But his political power, as you say, is also something that is central to the British Constitution. We became used to, over 70 years, Queen Elizabeth II taking a very hands-off approach. But it doesn't mean that the royal prerogative powers are not there. And what we've seen in the last few years is that the role of head of state, the role of the sovereign, can be important on issues. During the Brexit debates, for example, Boris Johnson prorogued Parliament. That's a power that can only be exercised by the monarch. And so there are various things like that where there are reserved powers that Charles, as king now, will have.
So, Nigel, as you are well aware, Queen Elizabeth II was very popular in the United Kingdom. It strikes me, and you tell me if I'm reading this right, that there was sort of built-in sentimental affection for Queen Elizabeth because of her many years on the throne, because of her service during World War II, because her father, George VI, was such a rock during a very difficult period in Britain. But that Charles, perhaps does not have the same built-in sentimental affection that the Queen had. And in fact, it strikes me that the popularity of the monarchy now seems to be tourists. As I look behind you and see all the people milling about in front of Buckingham Palace, my guess is that most of them are tourists, not ordinary Londoners. So how will Charles fare in the eyes of the British public?
Well, as you say, there are quite a lot of American tourists here as well. I've seen on the Mall, some of them camping out already. But I think you're right to say that over 70 years, the late Queen built up a huge store of public goodwill. Not constantly, there were periods during her reign when her popularity did decline. But overall, she didn't put a foot wrong. And I think in political terms, I think that was something which we became used to, that we had a sovereign who was trusted, who was somebody that people looked to as you say, as an absolute rock. When we have, perhaps in the future, constitutional crises where we need to have those reserved powers of the sovereign invoked, there is a question mark over the way in which the king will be able to exercise those. Catherine Haddon of the Institute for Government came up with a very good phrase where she talked about the good queen theory of the Constitution in the UK. That the fact that Queen Elizabeth II was seen as untouchable meant politicians behaved themselves. They didn't want to embarrass the Queen. I think we haven't yet seen whether that same sort of veneer of respectability surrounds the king, and whether politicians, when it comes to it, will have the same reticence about involving the monarchy in politics. That's something which I think is a real question.
And I think the other thing that the Queen did enjoy for many, many decades is sort of a healthy distance between the public and her. We didn't know the messy nitty-gritty of her personal life like we do with Charles. We know about the drama with Camilla and Harry and Meghan, who, they've written books. It's
an interesting point, Anne-Marie. Now that you're saying that, I actually, because the drama around the monarchy has seemingly swirled around Queen Elizabeth, right?
Yeah.
We knew about the drama with her sister, right, Princess Margaret. We knew about the drama with her uncle, Edward VIII.
Yeah.
We knew about the drama with Charles and all her children, but never the Queen.
Well, you know what I think? I think she's benefited from being a lovely old lady for many, many years, for many of us, right? Because when she had passed away and I was reading more about her, I read about how at one point she was heavily criticized for sort of being a working woman and leaving her kids back at home and putting her kids in boarding school.
Yeah.
So she did have to deal with that. It's just it's not in our current memory, right? But I wonder if the challenge for the king is that we do know that he's not perfect, that he's not above it all.
Great point.
And here we have Harry, who's attending the coronation. Meghan Markle is not. I don't know if that's even anything they are talking about in the UK now, because maybe the coronation is bigger than this sort of squabbling. But I don't expect the Sussexes to stop talking about, what they would like to see fixed about the monarchy.
Yes, and I think you're right to say that, we've known Elizabeth II for 70 years. We've also known Charles for 70 years as well. He's the longest serving heir to the throne. And this is a very different start to a reign than what we saw 70 years ago with Elizabeth II. She was a young woman, she was 25. We knew nothing about her political views. We knew, as you say, very little about her personal life, apart from the very restricted amount of information that was given at that time. We know a huge amount about the king and his private life, but also his political views, his campaigning on the environment, his campaigning on architecture and various other causes. So again, there is a huge difference here between a sovereign who for 70 years was removed from the political fray and we didn't know very much about her, and somebody who we know a lot about. And I think that is a difference. The king has said that he recognises he can't continue campaigning on some of these issues. But inevitably, the very fact that we know he cares so much about some of them will have an impact.
Nigel Fletcher, thank you very much. Where will you be tomorrow, Nigel?
Well, on Saturday, I think I'll be here with you.
All right.
Oh, great.
Love it. Thank you. So as Nigel just mentioned, you can tune in bright and early right here on CBS News to watch the coronation of King Charles III at 5 a.m. Eastern this Saturday. Emery, it's a natural time for you. You should be up.
You think I'd be used to it, right? Not on the weekends.